Let's welcome in now Brian Fonseca, director of the Gordon Institute, alongside Jay Town, who's going to talk to us about some of the legal implications involved here. Gentlemen, great to see you both.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
All right.
Beard looks good, bud.
Thank you. Thank you. So does yours. It's something I'm trying new for 2026. But let's enough about me. Let's talk about the situation at hand here. First, Brian, what do you make of all this? The warning shot that he sent to Gustavo Petro. As you know, and as Jay knows as well, Cuba is hanging by a thread. It's a failed state already, but it's got a lot of problems as well. Is there a domino effect at play here?
I think a domino effect is absolutely coming. I mean, I don't think that the president is going to leverage the military to try to displace Petro from Colombia. The U.S. and Colombia have a long and deep history of important and meaningful relationships. And so I don't think that's the case. I think that may have been just President Trump kind of poking at Petro and essentially, trying to push Petro to sort of get some of the illicit trafficking and criminal activity operating in the Colombian border out of the way. I think Cuba, on the other hand, as you rightly point out, it is a failed state. And I think Cuba is probably easier to fall than we see in Venezuela. I think, though, when you cut off Venezuela, that essentially cuts all of the last lifelines that Cuba had. And I think Cuba is just a matter of time. And I think Cuba is important, particularly for Secretary Rubio, because it's deeply personal. Secretary Rubio is a son of Cuban immigrants. And I think the Cuba issue is personal to him. And so I expect Cuba to be on the list. You also mentioned Greenland. I think the president's dead serious about Greenland.
Yeah.
I don't expect he's going to leverage the military, but I definitely think that Greenland is going to be up in the priority list in terms of countries that he's going to apply pressure in order to bring under the American fold.
Because as he indicated, if it's not the United States showing its influence over Greenland, China and Russia will absolutely do the same thing. Now, Jay, a lot of Democrats are, have their panties in a knot about the fact that President Trump did this without congressional approval. This is something that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, addressed on the Sunday shows. Watch this.
Well, we will seek congressional approval for actions that require congressional approval. But otherwise, they will get congressional notification. And this is not an operation that required congressional approval. In fact, this is an operation akin to what virtually every single president for the last 40 years has conducted. The difference is that when it's Donald Trump, all these Democrats go bonkers.
So, Jay, talk to us. You're an attorney. You're a JAG officer. Give us your legal explanation on whether or not the president needed approval from Congress here.
So the Google Law School grads are alive and well, not only on Twitter and other platforms, but in the United States Senate and Congress. Unfortunately, the War Powers Act, which the Congress, we wrote it down so they could actually go read it. It only requires that we give notice within 48 hours of any action, extraterritorial action by our United States military. We just have to tell them we did it. We don't have to get their approval. We certainly don't need to tell them beforehand, especially when there's an operation such as this, where the timing and the window of opportunity was so small due to weather and other sort of factors. And so there really is not any legal issue with anything that Donald Trump has done here, and that includes any defenses or motions that Maduro and his wife might be filing to try to get their extradition sort of tossed out and sent back to Venezuela.
Well, as you mentioned, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, appearing in court today, both pleading not guilty. We got to bring this up as well because this made me laugh out loud when I read it. The newly inaugurated mayor of New York City, Zohar Mamdani, wrote this on X. I was briefed this morning on the U.S. military capture of Venezuelan president, he says, not dictator. He calls him president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. Unilaterally attacking a sovereign nation is an act of war and a violation of federal law and international law. He went on to talk about how this impacts Venezuelans living in New York City. I mean, I knew he was going to be bad, but Jay, this is really bad on so many levels.
Yeah, well, look, it's not surprising, as you're sort of alluding to, that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Unfortunately, there's a lot of United States senators on the left who have sort of espoused the same incorrect interpretation of our laws. The UN Charter allows us to defend ourselves. The War Powers Act, as I mentioned, allows us to do exactly what we did without congressional approval. This is not an act of war. This was a police action. This tracks very well with what we did in Nicaragua with Noriega, and then in Mexico with cartel members that tortured and murdered a DEA agent, and we brought them back to justice. They tried those same arguments, and the Supreme Court said no.
Yeah. Brian, I wanted to just get your thoughts real quickly on what many people are calling the Donroe Doctrine. Of course, it's a continuation of the Monroe Doctrine, the Roosevelt Corollary, the Treaty of Rio. It's not an overstatement to say that the only reason that these countries exist, basically, is because the United States has had hegemony over the Western Hemisphere for as long as it has. Just give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is our hemisphere. It's a shared hemisphere with countries that have consistent values and political cultures that are similar to ours. This is an area we have been dominant. And the concept of strategic denial dates all the way back to the Monroe Doctrine, which was about, at that time, keeping European powers out from coming back into the Western Hemisphere and recolonizing parts of the hemisphere. And so the United States took a stand to keep those countries out. And I think similarly now, a lot of our strategy position towards the Western Hemisphere, and if you read the National Security Strategy, it articulates this as well. It's about keeping our adversaries out of close geographic proximity to the United States, out of the Western Hemisphere, out from sort of undermining the democratic values and sort of the security and prosperity of the hemisphere. And I think that's the concept that's laid out. And what some are arguing is sort of this Donroe Doctrine is a sort of this reprisal of the concept of strategic denial.
It's an important aspect that has allowed this hemisphere to have any semblance of Western civilization. It's such an important thing to defend, and it's nice we have a president in the Oval Office that is willing to do that. Gentlemen, great to have you both here. As always, Jay Town, Brian Fonseca, we appreciate your insights, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.